The sun rose softly over the small town of Willow Creek. The morning air was cool and full of the smell of pine trees. Birds sang from the rooftops, and the light touched the old wooden houses one by one. Somewhere near the edge of town, a young boy named Ethan ran barefoot through the grass, laughing as his dog Max chased after him. Ethan was 10 years old, full of energy and dreams. He had messy brown hair and curious eyes that always looked for adventure. Max was his shadow, a golden retriever with soft fur and eyes that seemed to understand every word Ethan said. They were more than best friends. They were brothers in spirit. Every morning before the world fully woke up, Ethan and Max would run to the meadow behind their little farmhouse. The grass would sparkle with dew, and the rising sun would paint the sky in gold and pink. Ethan would throw a stick, and Max would dash through the field to bring it back, tail wagging proudly. Sometimes Ethan would fall to the ground, laughing so hard that Max would jump on him, licking his face until he couldn't stop smiling. They shared everything: secrets, snacks, and silence. When Ethan's parents argued inside the house, he would sneak out to the old oak tree, and Max would quietly sit beside him, pressing his warm fur against Ethan's shoulder. No words were needed. Max just knew. One summer evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Ethan sat on the porch steps with Max. The sky turned orange and purple, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Ethan whispered, "Hey, buddy, promise me we'll always be together, okay?" Max tilted his head, ears up, and barked softly as if saying yes. Ethan smiled. "Good, because I don't want to do life without you." Inside the house, voices were rising again. His parents were fighting, louder this time. Ethan tried to ignore it. He hugged Max tightly and said, "You're the only one who never leaves, huh?" Max nuzzled his arm in reply. Days passed, but the tension inside the house grew worse. Ethan's father wanted to move to the city for work. His mother didn't. Arguments filled the nights. One morning, Ethan woke up to boxes being packed. His father's voice was sharp. "We're leaving tomorrow, Ethan. Just take what you need." Ethan's heart sank. "What about Max?" His father didn't look at him. "We can't take the dog." "Not where we're going." Ethan froze. He looked at Max, who wagged his tail, unaware of what was happening. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. "No, Dad, please. He's my best friend. I'll take care of him. I'll feed him. He won't be any trouble." His father sighed. "I said no." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Max lay beside his bed, breathing softly. Ethan reached down, running his fingers through his fur, whispering, "I'm not leaving you. I can't." The next morning was quiet, too quiet. Ethan's parents were loading the car. His mom called from outside, "Ethan, hurry up!" He stood in the doorway, eyes full of tears, looking at Max. The golden dog wagged his tail, ready for another adventure. Ethan knelt and hugged him hard. "I'll come back for you, Max, I promise. Just wait for me." He pressed his forehead to Max's and whispered, "Don't forget me." As the car drove away, Max ran behind it, barking, his paws hitting the dirt road, desperate to catch up. Ethan looked out the back window, hand pressed to the glass, crying silently as the distance grew between them. Max kept running until he couldn't anymore. And then he stopped, standing in the middle of the road, watching the car disappear into the horizon. The wind moved softly through his fur. The only sound left was the echo of a promise.
Years passed. Seasons changed. The boy who left Willow Creek grew into a man. Ethan now lived in the city. Tall buildings, loud streets, and lights that never slept. But deep inside, a part of him always stayed in that small town. In that little house, beside that golden dog waiting at the gate, life moved fast. Ethan finished college, got a job, met people, and built a life. Yet, no matter where he went, he could never escape the sound of those paws running through the grass or the way Max used to bark when he came home. Sometimes, at night, he would dream of that last day, the dirt road, the car window, and Max running behind them until the road disappeared, though he always woke up before the dream ended. Heart pounding, tears wetting his pillow, Ethan tried to tell himself that Max must have found another family, that he was safe, happy, maybe even old by now. But something inside him whispered, he's still there. He's waiting. Years later, one quiet Sunday, Ethan was cleaning his apartment when he found something in an old box. It was a photograph, faded and creased at the edges. In it, a small boy smiled with his arm around a golden dog. Written on the back in messy handwriting were 3 words, "I'll come back." Ethan stared at it for a long time. The city noise faded. He felt that same warm breeze from his childhood, and he could almost hear the distant echo of Max's bark. Something inside him shifted. Maybe it was time to keep that promise. The next morning, Ethan packed a small bag and got in his car. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He just drove, mile after mile, through cities, through fields, until the roads grew smaller and quieter. The air smelled of pine again. The sky looked softer today as he entered Willow Creek. Memories flooded back. The laughter, the fields, the oak tree, the smell of home. But something was different now. The houses looked older. The roads seemed smaller. Yet his heart beat faster with every turn till he parked near what used to be his family's farmhouse. The paint was faded, the fence half broken, but it was still there. The oak tree stood tall, like it had been waiting all these years. Ethan stepped out of the car and took a deep breath. He whispered, "Hey, Max, you still around, buddy?" There was only silence. The wind rustled through the leaves. Ethan walked around the old porch, touching the wooden railings, remembering every corner. His eyes burned with tears he hadn't let fall in years. He sat down on the steps, staring at the empty field. It was so quiet that he could hear his own heartbeat. For a moment, he thought he saw something, a shadow moving near the trees. But it disappeared. Then, suddenly, a sound. A bark. It was faint, weak, but familiar. Ethan froze. He turned toward the sound, heart racing. There, near the old oak tree, stood a golden retriever, older, slower, but with eyes that still held the same love, the same recognition. "Max," Ethan whispered, voice shaking. The dog took one step forward. Then another. His tail wagged weakly, as if afraid this was a dream. Ethan dropped to his knees. "It's me, buddy. I came back." Max let out a soft whine, half cry, half joy, and ran toward him, as fast as his tired legs could go. Ethan caught him in his arms, burying his face in Max's fur. Tears fell freely now. Years of distance disappeared in one embrace. The world around them vanished. It was just a man and his dog, together again, where they belonged. The wind blew gently through the trees, carrying with it the scent of home and the sound of promises kept. For a long time, they stayed like that, saying nothing, yet saying everything that mattered. Ethan whispered, "You waited for me. You really waited." Max licked his hand, eyes shining. He didn't need words. His presence said it all, and for the first time in many years, Ethan smiled, a real smile, the kind that comes from peace, because after all this time, the promise was kept. The sky turned orange as the sun began to set behind the hills. Ethan sat on the porch steps of his old family house, his arm wrapped around Maximum. The years had changed them both. Ethan was no longer the boy who left, and Max was no longer the young dog who chased butterflies through the fields. Time had painted silver lines through Max's golden fur, and there was a gentle tiredness in his eyes. But in that moment, everything felt just like before, peaceful, warm, and right. Ethan smiled softly and whispered, "We made it back, buddy." Max leaned against him, tail brushing lightly against the porch floor. It was as if his eyes said, "I knew you would." For hours, they just sat there, watching the sky change colors, feeling the breeze that carried years of memories. The sounds of the crickets slowly began to fill the air again, just like when they were kids. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling that same stillness he hadn't felt in years. He stayed in Willow Creek that night. He found an old blanket, laid it near the oak tree, and fell asleep beside Max under the stars. The air was cool, and the night sky shimmered with the same constellations he used to count as a child. Max rested his head on Ethan's arm, and for the first time in a long while, they both slept peacefully. The next morning, Ethan woke to sunlight touching his face. Max was still asleep beside him, breathing softly. Ethan smiled. "You waited all these years, didn't you?" He got up, stretched, and looked at the old house. It was quiet now, empty, but still full of memories. Ethan decided he couldn't leave again. Something inside him knew this was where he belonged. He spent the next few days cleaning the house. Dust floated in the air, sunlight spilling through broken windows. He fixed the old porch, repainted the door, and cut down the tall grass that had grown wild around the fence. Max followed him everywhere, even though his steps were slower now. Every time Ethan turned, Max was there, watching, guarding. Just like always. One evening, Ethan found an old wooden box under the stairs. Inside were a few of his childhood toys, a baseball glove, and a faded collar with the name Max carved into a small metal tag. Ethan held it in his hand and smiled through tears. "We've come a long way, huh?" He walked out to the oak tree and placed the collar around Max's neck again. "This belongs to you," he whispered. As days turned into weeks, the farmhouse began to look alive again. Flowers bloomed near the porch. The fields turned green. And every morning, Ethan and Max would take a slow walk together, just like they used to, only this time, they didn't have to say goodbye. Neighbors began to notice. Some remembered the boy who had once lived there. They'd wave and smile, saying, "Didn't think we'd see this place shine again." Ethan would smile back and say, "It's the dog. He's the real reason it's alive again." Life found rhythm. Simple, quiet, beautiful, but time, as it always does, kept moving. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned golden, Max lay on the porch beside Ethan, head resting on his lap. His breaths were slower, softer. Ethan looked down, gently stroking his fur. "You can rest now, Maximum. You did your part. You kept your promise." Max's eyes met his one last time, filled with love, peace, and a silent goodbye. The wind whispered through the fields as Max took his final breath. Ethan sat there quietly, tears streaming down his face, holding his old friend close. He buried Max under the oak tree, right where they used to play. He carved into the trunk, "Here lies Max, my first friend, my forever home." Days later, Ethan planted wildflowers around the grave. Every morning, sunlight would fall perfectly over that spot, and it looked like the earth itself was smiling. Years passed again. The house stayed full of warmth and life. Ethan never left Willow Creek. He would often sit under the oak tree, talking softly to the wind, telling stories, laughing to himself, remembering the days that built him, and sometimes, when the evening breeze blew just right, he could swear he heard the soft patter of paws running through the field. Free, happy, alive, Ethan would smile and whisper, "See you soon, buddy." Because some promises live forever.